that is like to the side. It is since it's a little closer to the audience.
Okay.
And there's a copy of the book out there also on the table.
Oh, great. So we don't need. I don't need a watch, I guess.
I will. I didn't see it before.
Hi everyone, thank you all for coming out here tonight. My name is Tiffany and I'm the marketing and event coordinator here at Books Are Magic. We are so excited to have Hilary, Plum, and Eugene here with us tonight to celebrate State Champ. But before we get started, I wanted to point out some logistics for how tonight's event is going to go. If you need to use a restroom at any point, the door is located right next to the Moleskine spinner on the right side of the room. We'll be doing hand-raised audience Q&A toward the end of the discussion, so start thinking of questions to ask and hold on to them tight. After the talk tonight, Hilary will be signing and personalizing books at the table next to where you checked in. We'll let you know where and when to line up for that. If you're joining us virtually on the YouTube live stream, we'd love to encourage you to buy a copy of State Champ online using the link in the live stream description. State Champ. Lucid, strange, and deeply metal, State Champ cuts through the political rhetoric to explore the relationship between bodily autonomy and real freedom. Angela's story is about what abortion access means day to day and how much we are, in ways that can transform us, responsible for one another. Hilary Plum is the author of 5 books, including the poetry collection Excisions, the essay collection Whole Studies, and the Fence Modern Prize in Prose-winning novel Strawberry Fields. She teaches at Cleveland State University and in the Neal MFA program, and she serves as the Associate Director of the CSU Poetry Center. Her work has appeared in Grana, Astra, The Rupture, Los Angeles Review of Books, Cleveland Review of Books, and elsewhere. She lives in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. Eugene is the author of the novels Fog and Car, The Strangers, Dear Cyborgs, and Search History. His writings have appeared in The New Yorker, The Believer, The Brooklyn Rare, The Vaffler, Dazed, Fence, Little Star, Grana, and elsewhere. He is a high school librarian, runs Ellipsis Press, and lives in Queens, New York with Joanna and Felix. So without any further delay, please join me in giving the warmest welcome to these two.
Thank you all for coming. Today is May 14th, 2025, and I think all of us now feel and understand, perhaps better than we used to, what it's like for cruel and insane men to steal and bully themselves into power, and then to use that power for cruel and insane purposes. It leaves one feeling incredibly angry, it leaves one feeling scared and powerless, and it can leave one feeling hopeless. How to address and confront those feelings of rage, terror, and hopelessness is the question of this moment, of our moment, and to the extent that it is about confronting cruel power with protest, it is the central question of Hilary Plum's novel. A prescient and fierce and hilarious work that addresses these very crucial questions with direct clarity and devastating insights. State Champ, the novel we're here to celebrate, on one level has a simple plot. A state government has passed a deceptively named heartbeat law, effectively outlawing abortion. Dr. M, however, continues providing healthcare and abortions at her clinic despite this law. She is betrayed and jailed. But the heroine of Plum's novel is not the heroic Dr. M. Rather, Plum's main protagonist is Angela, who was once a track star, thus the state champ of the title, and someone who, through a series of unfortunate events, her own subtle but bright sense of ethics, and a number of fuck-ups, finds herself as the, quote, downwardly mobile receptionist of the now-closed abortion clinic. Angela begins her own, at first almost semi-private protest. She locks herself inside the clinic and begins a hunger strike. The novel is her journal, which she writes on the exam table paper detailing the days of the hunger strike. Plum has written about protest before. It's funny to call you Plum. Hilary Plum has written about protests before. It's sometimes effervescent justifications, and it's almost always murky consequences. This time, in State Champ, the novel becomes less an indictment of our hypocrisies, or not only such an indictment, but rather elevates the protest as an articulation and goal of its own. Forget anything I said, Plum has Angela say. The hunger strike is talking. I'm saying what it's saying. And so the novel becomes less an indictment than somehow an invitation, an almost gentle invitation to take a good hard look at the corruption and abuses of power that are currently occurring, and to ask, even in the face of hopelessness and fear and rage, what can I do? As well as, what can I think? This is accomplished through Angela's crisp and very funny voice, a performance which nonetheless manages to strip out performative rebellion and all spin and bullshit moralizing to allow a powerless individual to speak truth to indifferent and colossal power, and allows us, the readers, despite that indifferent colossal power, to hear such truth. This is Hilary Plum's third novel. Her others include her debut, 2013's They Dragged Them Through the Streets, published by FC2, about the consequences of the US war in Iraq, which the late, great Atala Adnan says she read, quote, as if in one breath, and which made clear for her that, quote, the great American silence is at the root of the great American melancholy. Plum's second novel was 2018's multivocal Strawberry Fields, winner of the Fentz Modern Prize in Prose, about humanitarian disasters and war around the world. Her other books include, as we've heard, the essay collection Whole Studies, published in 2022 by Phonograph Editions, and Excisions, a collection of poetry from 2023, published by Black Lawrence Press. It is my great pleasure to welcome Hilary Plum.
Thank you, Eugene. No, no, I don't have anything to say. I'm really happy to be here with all of you and to be here with Eugene, who's really one of my favorite writers. And many people in this room hope this book exists. But I'm not going to cry about it right now. I'm going to read maybe a little chunk, and then we'll kind of talk, and then y'all can come in with any thoughts or questions you have. I've read from this novel one other time, and I want to shout out Sean Zubin, who was there at a literary reading Cleveland chose to have on St. Patrick's Day, I feel like. So not many people were there. But other than that, this is the first time that it's been like this in a book. So I'm going to read from a little bit of this. It's this journal, as Eugene described, that Angela, our protagonist, is keeping while she's on hunger strike. This is from day 7. So what's happening so far is not a lot. She's started this protest, but one problem is that no one's really paying a lot of attention. So it's not kind of a successful act of publicity. So that's one problem that she's grappling with. And she's trying to kind of get a hold of her ex, John, who's a reporter, and see if he'll make something happen for her. And for this, to kind of get some attention around this act. And also, she's in a little back and forth, both in reality and in her mind, with 2 women who are maybe more professional than she is, that she thinks about a lot, which is her coworker Donna, who kind of ran the clinic as their kind of office manager, and this anti-abortion activist named Janine, who will show up here, who's good at what she does. Okay, I'll just read this little bit, and that'll give you a sense of the situation. Evening again, witching hour. I've been in the sleeping bag all afternoon. Exam room 2, which I think might be the worst. Shiver, shiver, really sweating it up in here. The whole sweating while cold thing has never made sense to me, but the proof is in because the sleeping bag reeks. Earlier, I tried to hop my way to refill my water bottle. Little lemon, little salt. Honestly, I thought about it for a long time before getting up. Getting up is an event. You have to kind of prop up slowly in stages, head rush, shivering, big cramps. Does anyone know when their last shit has been taken? I have the water with me now, but I feel pretty bad. My fault for trying to hop my way in a sleeping bag, but I was freezing, and when I got myself upright, my own blood just didn't participate. All the blood just dove for my feet, and my head was a big blood-free balloon. Like there was no difference between an actual skull skin blood organ situation that stood 5'5" and the old poster on the wall behind me, a portrait of a bisected girl, pretty teensy curl of fallopian tube, featureless face, general white person flesh look. We were the same, poster girl and I, gone 2D. I clipped my arm hard on the counter as I went down, hit the corner. Must have been trying to catch myself. I think my arm was tucked awkward inside the bag, and so I flung it out while I pirouetted down like a helicopter spinning down from a maple tree, but dumber. My arm is still kind of bleeding. The blood is weird. I can't tell if it's weird. There's a dent, like the counter stuck a sharp, tiny finger into the flesh and curled it up like, come here. Anyway, that's why there's blood all over this. Yesterday, I dragged 2 exam tables together. It was not easy, and now exam room 1 has no table, and there are 2 here in room 2, which I think was the wrong choice. Something's wrong with this room, but I'm not going to drag everything back. I laid some binders out to make a hard surface on the second table. Now I can prop myself up, lean over, and write. John, you owe me this. I'm like in your world now. I'm news. I'm obviously interesting. For this to work, I need to be news. It's not a hunger strike if no one knows about it. That's just a diet. Here I am in some shut down office, dieting. What did Janine say to me once? I used to be like you. Bullshit, and she knew it. Janine was a Donna. Donnas know Donnas. They'd kick me out of that convention on sight. Honestly, if I have an equivalent on the other side, it's the old drunk guy who still turns up in the parking lot every few months like he didn't get the memo. No one told him his kind got reformed out, and he's holding some wet Bible he keeps trying to stuff in his back pocket where it doesn't fit, but he keeps trying, like he's still thinking, even though he owns probably just the one Bible and the one pair of pants. Get in there. That's me. Whenever he comes, Janine smiles real tight, and I once saw her reach forward and, like he was one of her little sons, zip his jacket up over his dumbass shirt, which bore variously gendered stick figures angrily arranged around some math symbols, as if this was how a higher being would communicate their law. Janine's smile is 100% unconvincing. I used to think this was a weakness. She's obviously never smiling. It's just something her face does to keep men calm. But recently, maybe just now, I realized that deep down guys know it's not real and that's what they like. She's the girl next door, but she's a killer. She's a sleeper agent. She's on their side. When Janine fake smiled at you, you thought, oh yeah, what if I barely pretended to live in the world? What if I kept my dead eyes on my own mission? I used to be like you. She said it twice. I didn't respond the first time, so she said it again. I was just then doing something a little obnoxious. I was handing out condoms to the protesters. Fruity condoms. Not handing out, throwing at. We got samples from a manufacturer. They showed up in the mail and I'd take some of the fun ones home. John, jog your memory? But that day the protesters were too fucking much. They were staying on the island in the parking lot, sure, but goddamn, the whiny hoses of their throats were emptying onto every normal person walking up, someone just wanting a little basic help with the wildest part of being alive. How life makes more of itself, it just uses you like you're not part of it. It's normal to have some questions about that, push back. But these whiners, and let's not pretend women's voices don't suck. It was like a sorority had spent 20 years braiding each other's hair too tight while driving up the costs of each other's weddings. Personally, I was done. I was hungover, I think, and they were slamming their rubber baby dolls into my sweet young brainstem till whiskey oozed out. I got a big handful of grape and strawberry flavored condoms out of my bag and ran out there. Contraceptives for the community, I screamed. I aimed for Janine's mouth. That's when she said it. I used to be like you. I was staring. You could say I looked insane, but I was the one getting paid for my time. Right then, what I was thinking, she was wearing a yellow check Talbot's type sundress that was kind of like a summer turtleneck, was that Janine had a huge rack, and so we were nothing alike. You're either a boob girl or you're not. If you're not, you're probably a leg girl. I don't mean people can't make a change if they want. They should do what they feel. I mean people know, moment by moment, which they are. It's a deep feeling. Janine's boobs were her whole point of view. I was braless. Whenever I threw a fruity condom at her face, my nipple skimmed the inside of my shirt like a mean giggle. Fuck you, Janine, I said. I was standing right where you're standing right now, she said. I worked for the other side. I helped kill so many babies. I feel your pain. I was getting the feeling this was a new speech, even to her obedient compadres, like people stopped to listen. Was I real or were they? We don't kill babies here, I said. So if you were killing babies somewhere, that seems like more of a personal problem. I can hear your pain, Janine said. You're feeling their pain and your own pain as a woman, and it's filling you with anger. That's what you'll understand when you join the side of life. You can love and serve God's creation instead of destroying the most innocent among us. Trust me, I'm not angry anymore. She'd stepped forward and I could see blobs in her mascara. Don't do the bottom lashes, Janine. 8 fucking feet, I said. You're not a patron, she said. That law is for patrons. Angela, Donna was saying, hot hand on my throwing arm. We need you inside. Janine and I could have gone some more rounds, but here was Rose walking slowly from an old station wagon toward the clinic door, and the whole dance was starting, the pamphlets, shrieking, simpering little pleas. Janine, own it. You're the angriest bitch I know. John, what I'm saying is that's why I DM'd her. Janine gets it. You don't. I'll stop there.
That was terrific. I think you got a taste of Angela's voice, and we'll talk about it. There's a humor to it, and there's a truth to it. But before we talk about Angela's voice for a moment, do you want to talk a little bit about the origin of the book? Did it come from the idea of a hunger strike? Did it have come from abortion? Did it come from, or is there a clear origin story for you?
I was trying to think about this because it's always hard to like remember why you did anything.
Yeah.
I started this in summer 2020, and so it was like before Dobbs, before Roe fell, and it was, you know, so I didn't have like a particular premonition that was going to happen, but I was in that same, you know, question many people were in, which was like that abortion access was more and more restricted, and particularly in places like Ohio, you know, like, so it was legal, but it was very hard to get. So that kind of, and there was a heartbeat bill that had gone through in Ohio that just had been blocked because of the federal level of protection. So I sort of started thinking about that. And then about like the relationship between the hunger strike and abortion as kinds of questions of like bodily autonomy, or like, I think the word that I was thinking of at the time was like, what's latent, like what's a latent potential that's in you, which is like a hunger strike is a very desperate form of speech, right? It's a kind of speech you resort to when that's it, you know, like that's all that you have left. You know, it's why people use it in prison or in situations where their voice is no longer heard. So that it's a kind of like, and eventually I read this like very good book about hunger strike called whose name I can never ever remember. It's in here. Last Weapons by Kevin Grant. But it was talking about that, like that feature of the hunger strike, right? That it's like, it's a kind of speech you may have available to you if you need it. And so there was some kind of connection there with also like fertility or having kids, you know what I mean? Like that's a potential that's latent in you. And you might use it at some point, you might not. It might not be there when you want it, you know. So there was something in that back and forth of this question of like, what autonomy we have over our bodies versus our state of relation with each other, where we find our freedom, and also thinking about protest as like a kind of latent thing, you know, like when will it kind of arise out of people? What will that look like? What sort of like rupture will happen, or what kind of new form of relation or speech may come from us? So it was somewhere in all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the latent idea, and it's latent because it's within the body.
Yeah.
And when you go through the book, I think there is a real sense of the body is centered. We feel the hunger happen. We feel the hunger strike occur. And its relation to why the protest is happening kind of becomes first subtly and then very clear, the relationship, you know, between our bodies. So the latency makes sense. What else was I say? Anyway, the Angela's voice is so unique, and you have her say something like, "Abortion is so real. Have you ever noticed that when people talk about it, they say the realest things? This is real, the hunger strike." So Angela is not an unreliable narrator. She's very reliable. She speaks the truth in a lot of ways. I mean, she tells jokes, but she speaks the truth. Do you want to talk about how that voice came out?
Yeah, I had a lot of a certain kind of joke that I didn't have anywhere to put it, which is like a writer, you know what I mean? Like where you have like something going in the back of your head and you're like, well, I need a voice. And they were kind of joke that's like a little bit annoying, which I think is true of her. You know what I mean? Like they're like, and my, I don't know if I should say that. Well, whatever. My husband would always call those jokes like quip Cheney, because it was sort of like a little overpowering or annoying, obnoxious. But anyway, so I was like, okay, what am I going to do with quip Cheney? Like, but also I was interested, and this, like some of you in this room are people I really love to talk about small press stuff and that side of publishing with, and I was interested in this question of like professionalism, and what professionalism mean, like that word, there's so much that gathers around that word in a small press context where we're not doing things for money. It's a lot of like volunteerism, or it's a lot of other, you want to like find ways of being professional that aren't corporate or that like belong to you and your idea of the practice. So like when I think of like the great editors and small press editors, what we're doing is like very professional, like it's like a really thoughtful practice that we've created structures around, but it's also like improvised and responsive and full of jokes and like full of things that look casual, and it's like relational. But it is like our profession, it is what editors do, so I was interested in that question of like what is actual professional, like so many of the people I know who are the best at what they do don't seem like professionals from the outside. And so I was in that.
Their professionalism is almost hidden sometimes.
Yeah. They are, what makes them so good is that they don't seem like professional, that they can be more casual, or they can be more improvisatory, or they're answering to a structure that they've created with you. Like it's not a structure that was imposed from the outside, like, which I feel like is a lot of, trying to make these horizontal collaborative structures in small press. So I was thinking about that, and I wanted to write someone who is a bad employee. And I think I just personally wanted to become a worse employee. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, I've always been such a good student and I've always been such a good employee, and that it's stupid. Like I shouldn't do that anymore. So that was part of like what I was looking for from Angela and Quip Cheney was like, how do you become a bad employee who I think like is maybe still a good person, like, or is finding a way to be a good person, which means that you're not doing some things in your context that you don't believe in.
And the thing about Angela is she might not be a great receptionist.
She's not a great receptionist.
But she somehow understands the mission of the clinic in a deep way, and has oriented her life unprofessionally, but perfectly and in a true way.
Yeah. And I felt like I was starting to feel, and maybe this developed more after like, after Roe fell, and like it gets really like frustrating when fields that women work in, you're supposed to be like a saint or a martyr. You know what I mean? That like I do deeply honor and admire people who work in abortion care, but they shouldn't have to be like, you know what I mean? Like you can just be a fucking person. Like it's not, and it gets like so many of the field, like teaching or all of these, editing is also often like feminized in that way, where it's supposed to be this labor of love, and this idea that in doing it you would be this like saintly person and it would be self-sacrificing in some way. So I wanted to be in some other kind of voice or person who wasn't like that and who didn't answer to that kind of projection where we need that from women. Yeah.
I remember before I heard about the term emotional labor, there was this in libraries a long time ago. The professor told us about a book talking about a new way to train flight attendants, and I think the book is called The Managed Heart or something like that. Like that tells you a lot, right? About what is expected. And okay, so let's talk about speaking of that. Angela has a particular class and racial position, but a class position that kind of gets revealed, and then more things get disclosed about her. And when we spoke, you called her, quote, downwardly mobile. And I think that positioning allows her to say a lot of the truths. But could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things I feel curious, like what readers think of it. You know what I mean? Like I have a perspective on it, but I don't know if that's like the complete or final one. But I do feel like she's sort of in between class, like that she's from a more stable middle class background, but she's downwardly mobile. Like she doesn't quite belong to that anymore through both like what she's been up to and some things that happen in her family. But that means that she like accesses as more like bourgeois culture, like she like knows about that, and people in her family belong to that, and I think she belonged to it at some point. But it means I wanted someone, like often a novel protagonist needs to be a little bit of a trickster in some way, they need to be between, and so she's a little bit between in that way, I think. And that does hopefully give her both a perspective and also like a little bit of arrogance, you know what I mean? Like she has some privilege or some she's like working it out all the time, or figuring out like what it means, what you know. And she's not you know, we learn a little bit about the people around. Like, she's not a super perceptive person. You know, she like, I think she like cares for people, but they're private to themselves, and she's private to herself. You know, like, so we learn a little bit about, you know, the people around her and what their backgrounds might be, or things about them, but it's not like a complete, you know, she just has little glimpses of people. And so somehow to me that felt right, to think about like healthcare or abortion care, or like ways that you are encountering people briefly in a state, you know, from everywhere, and from a state of in a state of need from all over, you know, like any corner of society. It's about, you know, it's a body, it needs care. So I was thinking about that in ways that in states of like medical, you know, when you're in the hospital, things like that, like you are very aware of like many different classes and backgrounds like coming together in that space, and it's not equal, you know, like it is not equalizing, like different outcomes exist, but it is also a place of gathering, and where you can kind of witness how those things work differently. So I was thinking about that, and thinking too, like, I don't know if folks have had this like experience, but sometimes, you know, even when I've had like right now I have like the best healthcare I've ever had for my job, but sometimes you like can't make it, and you're like, I just have to go to like Planned Parenthood because I like can't get an appointment and can't figure, you know, like, and like that kind of play, you're like, Planned Parenthood is just there for you. Like it'll, you know, so that is also sort of class in like openness or invitation, that like a lot of the places providing that care, or that affordable health care, their door is open, and a lot of people can join and be there together. I don't know. Not to say that's utopia, but it is a thing. Like, yeah.
I hadn't thought about the clinic is also a place, or a medical place is also where you do see class getting all kinds of class coming together, and then being read very quickly by the people involved. And Angela reads class very quickly, and undercuts and comments. You know.
Yeah, and she doesn't like people who think they're better. She think they're better than her, but she's not necessarily, like, she's kind of angry about everyone. So I think it's like,
the anger is where the humor comes from. I'm about to ask a long-winded question, and but soon you will be invited to ask questions. So keep that in mind. I wanted to ask this question because in high school I was a big Sinead O'Connor fan, and Hilary Plum has written about Sinead O'Connor in this essay called "The Loneliness of Sinead O'Connor." And one reason I wanted to bring it up is because Sinead O'Connor famously had this moment of protest where she ripped a photo of the Pope on SNL, unplanned, or to everyone else, it was an unplanned gesture. Hilary writes about this. O'Connor made a global spectacle. Lyrics altered. The Pope's image ripped and destroyed, dismissed, despised. That wasn't clear. The protest wasn't not easy to grasp or assimilate or applaud. This gesture, so provocative, risked illegibility. O'Connor asked people to listen to something they didn't already know how to hear, didn't know how to understand, couldn't just say what the summary would be. This kind of listening takes work. She didn't offer a slogan or a cause to donate to. She didn't explain herself. She wanted to say what she wanted to say. If you wanted to know what that was and why she said it, you'd have to get in there and interpret. You'd have to listen, then try to say something yourself. This is very similar to Angela's protest. At some point, Angela thinks the act of the hunger strike should be articulate enough. She doesn't have to say why she's protesting. The hunger strike is the articulation. Forget anything I said. The hunger strike is talking. I'm saying what it's saying, Angela says. Dr. M was just doing her job, and her job is helping people, and they should let her out, which they're not going to do. I'm willing to do this to say that. This is something profound about our bodies and our destinies, which the hunger strike, is articulating, but our laws and our language cannot. Maybe poetry and literature is that which articulates what language cannot. But would you care to speak about this passage where Angela is almost delirious from the hunger strike and kind of talking to a reporter, and she's kind of recollecting what she has said or what she's trying to say about the justification for her hunger strike?
Yeah, I think, thanks for bringing Sinead. I think, like,
she got destroyed by that. I mean,
Yeah.
in her career, she was very much destroyed by that moment.
Yeah.
And she did this thing which was risked illegibility. So sorry.
Yeah, no, and she didn't. Many people didn't really know what her cause was or what she was talking about. And she didn't explain it.
Yeah.
She didn't tell them, and maybe people know it's like that was her mom's picture. It was a picture that her mom had and that she saved, because her mom was, I think, both very beloved to her and was abusive of her. And I think like what I was trying to get at maybe in those two passages is like an idea about art, right? That it shouldn't be as you know what I mean? Like one thing it's doing is it's challenging your modes of understanding. And you shouldn't like that, but that means you have to do some work, right? Like the listen, like Sinead she didn't get that from, you know what I mean? People didn't want to listen. They didn't want to like figure out what she was trying to say or how to receive her. And I think she was okay with that. She never expressed any regret about it, and in fact seemed very content with how things happen. But it's a calling to the, it's calling us into relation, right? It's calling us into like that you have to do something next, and the thing you might have to do is figure out not just what someone was saying, but why people would express themselves in a way that's different from what you expected or what you wanted, or that their language is doing something different and their language is inciting a new mode of relation, inciting a new kind of imagination. And I think that like in that question of like what's art versus what's protest, I feel like people want protest to be they want it to be like effective, like it's supposed to like do a thing, it's supposed to fell the government, or whatever it is it's supposed to do, or but you're like, I mean, I think protest can be an art, like it's like maybe what it's doing is it's creating a rupture, it's creating a disruption in our everyday modes, it's interrupting the city itself, it's like it's trying to get us to relate to each other differently, even if just for a little bit of time. It's trying to get us to understand each other differently, and that's more of an artistic mode. And I get frustrated whenever people do something that's like political or a protest and they're kind of blamed for not packaging it better, that was like a classic like Occupy, where like, well, why didn't they get their message, and you're like, okay, like, why didn't we all understand them more, like why didn't we, I like that part is frustrating, because you're like, part of what people are doing, and particularly in a protest, and maybe this gets at the hunger strike part of it, is like they've maybe lost every other form of speech, like, and they've lost it because it was taken away. Like no one listened to the other things you said. And I feel like that the essay about Sinead is in an essay that's a lot about the Me Too movement, and how it was so like interesting and horrifying and weird in Me Too to be like, suddenly people were listening to the exact same things that people have been saying for a very long time. You know what I mean? Like, and about the same people, like all of it, like, it was like women had been saying this about like Harvey Weinstein for like 20 years. And suddenly the New Yorker was like, what? Like, and it like kicked on. Thank you to the New Yorker. Like, I don't have, like, it's good that it happened, but it's like, that part where you're like, okay, like no one, that's a problem with us, like that's like a listening problem or a relation problem. It wasn't like the speech was there, and the speech wasn't working, but not because, and I feel like many of us maybe have had that like happen at work or something, where there's like a persistent problem or an inequity or injustice, and and eventually someone's like, why did no one bring this up? And you're like, we have been talking about this for years. You know what I mean? Like we brought it up in every way we knew how, and it didn't matter. And I think that so maybe I was trying to get into some of those problems of like ways that people are very deliberately not heard, and that also that what is so importantly idiosyncratic or not intelligible about their speech is itself like effaced or insulted, or dismissed, when that is at the core of what they're saying. Like, I don't think like Sinead was like, she was speaking from somewhere like very dark, like I don't know that there's another way to talk about like her own experience of abuse and try to like connect it to a history of colonialism and do all of that on Saturday Night Live and do it, like, like I don't, what was she supposed, like, so I feel like that what was like sealed off about her speech was also about like the unspeakability of the acts that she was trying to refer to.
And you have Angela at some point, I can't remember the passage, but she's talking to someone and she says, it's not about being effective. It's I'm doing this because I'm doing this. It's the act is the act. Look at the act. I'm not saying anything else, but look at the act.
Yeah. You know? And the effectiveness is like loose. It's like you're like, I'm setting it loose. Like you all, someone else has to run with it. I don't know. Yeah.
And what you said earlier also about the hunger strike being the last kind of the last possibility of any agency, and what it is it's passive. You have it's an act where you are it's a refusal. It's a refusal, and then for it to matter, for it to be quote effective, someone has to note your refusal. So but for the protester, that noting is almost beside the point. This is what I have left.
They've reached that. I think in the book by Kevin Grant, which is particularly about hunger strikes as a anti-colonial tactic in response to the British Empire, and kind of spread across many different kind of sites. And one thing that he's exploring is how hunger strikes were seen to be effective because of relation, because guards don't it's humanly very unpleasant to watch someone starve to death, and it calls the guards into really, you know what I mean? Like they don't want that to happen. So it mobilizes the people right around the prisoner to try to do something to keep this from happening. And so it is like very intimate, actually, to like be like, I interact with people every day to whom I'm a prisoner, and they I'm trying to call them in to my humanity by making it a site of like insanely slow and terrible suffering, right in front, so that I don't know where.
I mean, and then the you touch on the forced feeding aspect in the book. I don't know why I flashed to the total anonymity or maskedness of the ICE guard, the ICE agents. And they're just total lack of empathy. Let's open it up to questions. If anyone has a question, raise your hand and feel free. Otherwise, I can go on. But don't be shy. There you go. Yes, please.
One of the things I love about Angela, or not love, it's not quite love, it's something. One of the things I admire about Angela is her endurance, which I think comes, or as a reader, I get it as coming from her career as a runner. And she talks about running in this way that I had never read it written about, almost like a meditation or I guess I'm just curious to hear you talk about that aspect of her character and that aspect of her past, which I've always understood it to have equipped her for what she's doing in a way.
Yeah, I wanted to. I wasn't ever a very good runner, and I think that like running is like cool and heartbreaking in that way. Like exactly how good you are. It's not a sport where you could be like, oh, if I was in a better league, I would like, you're like, I know exactly how fast I am compared to everyone in history. So I think it's like, it's kind of humbling in that way. It means you have to have a relationship to the thing itself, right? Like, why are you doing it? Literally, why? Like, I don't know, so I feel like I've asked that question a lot. Because I was very frustrated as a runner, and then I started to have these health problems. So I never got what I was looking for from it. So it was continually frustrating, but I kept going back to it, and I couldn't tell if that was like a sickness, or like a, like what that motivation was. So I wanted to explore that. And also I wanted to, like people, like runners are horrible to talk to. It's so righteous. When people are like, and I would get annoyed when people are like, do you have a lot of good ideas for writing while you're running? And I was like, no, I don't I don't think about anything good. Like, I just think about like something that I just like worry at something, or I like waste my own time. Like, I don't have a high quality thought. Like, I've never, and so I was like, I wanted to be in that more, but also that's like, it's one of the paradoxes of writing, because I was like proving myself to like a thesis, particularly to other writers who were like, running's so great for writing, like you solve these problems. And I was like, no. But then I did use it in this, but you know what I mean? So I like did eventually.
You were just trying to make running useful.
Yeah, I've spent so many hours of my life doing this thing that I'm not that good at, and I literally don't enjoy that much. And so I was like, I wanted to get it in there somewhere. But but I do also, there's like more, I think some things about running that could relate to questions that are more about like democracy or something are about like, one, everybody runs the same race, which is cool. You know what I mean? Like if you were the first person, the last person, you suffered pretty equally. Like just one person just moved faster than the other, you know? So that is like a nicely egalitarian aspect of it. Like you can relate to each other no matter what. And it is like you're using public space. You know what I mean? Like you move through the city, you move through wherever you are. And it's like a particular way that you are allowed to do that. And you're like, hopefully you're free to do that. So I felt like it was, there were ways that I was trying to figure out how it connected to these questions of like, what kinds of like freedom and privacy we allow each other in relation to, you know, to things like abortion, where people have different opinions about it, you know, like, so yeah, but I did want to get into the boringness of running a little bit.
Was it important that she was the state champ? At some point she said something like, someone asked, do you have any advice of running? Or she gives the advice, which is, you just have to be faster than the person behind you. That's and the other person says, it's got to be more than that, and she's like, nope. That's what it is.
It is I think it's like, it's so simple, and that's like very beautiful. I think like they're really like, I mean, of course you have like strategies and stuff, but it's not, you know, it's the simplest sport. I think we had one coach who was like, just run fast, turn left, you know. And you're like that. Yeah, I think it was important because that makes like it's so meaningful to like be the best at something, but then it doesn't matter, you know, like it also like, and I think that is part of it, where you're like, oh, I did achieve something, but it also vanished. And it's also like, I mean, it's so hard when you're a really, really good athlete, because it goes, and then you have to find another thing. Like, so I wasn't in that situation because I wasn't good enough, but it's like, you have to retool your whole identity. And also I wanted to think about that for women athletes, because I feel like that's not quite, and also for how exploitative it can be, particularly in sports like running, which are very, very plagued with eating disorders. At least in the era that I was running, there was still a lot of teams where that were okay with that. You know what I mean? Because it does actually make people faster for a short period of time. So that it was like, you know, the same way we see with with football, with all these, where they will let your body be destroyed as long as it's at a slow enough rate that people can get what they need, you know, like, and so that was part of what I wanted to look at, because that, particularly with all of it, but with something like an eating disorder, you can't just shake that off. You know what I mean? Like that's, you've maybe co-developed that with your sport, and then you're stuck with it. So, I think that question of the sort of like exploitativeness of athletics, I wanted to look at it for women's sports particularly.
And it was, it's on the character level, is the one thing that kind of takes her, it gives her kind of redemption, and then she loses it shortly after.
Yeah.
And then all the conflation, or the palimpsest of the themes of bodily harm, bodily control, of endurance, the endurance athlete, the eating disorders, the hunger strike, reproductive rights, you know, all coming together. I think is it all brings us back to the latency in the body, all these issues that you mentioned before.
Yeah. And it is also I feel like one of the long effects of eating disorders is often that you have trouble with fertility, but that only comes back later, you know, so yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, we have some. How about you?
Has I just, in writing this and in kind of preparing for its publication, have you started engaging with healthcare receptionists differently? Like, are you like, your characters in your own world now, or is it?
I guess I always liked engaging. I always like engaging with healthcare receptionists. I hadn't thought about that, but I was like, I always like, yeah, I always like talking to the receptionist at a healthcare, you know, because that's like how you how anything good happens.
For sure. I used to be a very bad
Oh.
healthcare.
I remember I do remember it once my favorite neurologist I ever had. He had like one for a while he had quite a bad receptionist, which was like sort of too bad. And one day she was actively I think she was getting fired in front of us all. And she like kind of stormed out and she like had this energy of like we would all be on her side, you know, on the worker side. She was like forget, you know, and everyone in the waiting room was like, no, we don't like you. It's been terrible working with you. So yeah, I do. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily super, you know, novels aren't always super realistic exactly. So I don't know how, if folks would be like, this isn't really what it's like, you know, but yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is a little bit more, I think, intense. I'm just curious, and I haven't read the book, I just got your book, but just from the passage that you read, I'm interested to know how you develop the characters that are anti-abortion, the ones that she's encountering, because, you know, I think the easy route is to just, you know, paint them as us versus them, right? They're wrong, we're right, but they do genuinely believe they're saving babies and, you know, they're doing the right thing, and there's a humanity to what they're trying to do as well. And I think that's often lost in the debate. So how do you go about like developing those characters that she's encountering with the humor? And I mean, I'm already really liking this character. So
I'll add to your question because we had when Hilary read the excerpt, there was the guy who the other Janine zipped up his jacket, and later or earlier you call the older protesters the Repent Whores group. Because that's what it is. And then you said, here's the quote that I had, because Janine, who she introduced, is a very important character. And then it said, you write Repent Whores as a group. Repent Whores were Facebook. Janine was Instagram. Like there are multiple facets. There's definitely their sincerity is played with. But yeah, please.
Yeah, I wanted to not like what you said, basically not have it be too you know, because it would be cheap to make that character like too easily dismissible or too thin or superficial. But I also wanted her to be like she's much more effective than Angela, you know, and I think Angela like knows that, you know, like she's like better at what she does, and that's a quality that Angela's really interested in, you know, is like how do you get things done. But I think it's like there's a lot of women in the anti-abortion, you know, there's a lot of the in a weird, I don't know if this is like a, you know, anti-patriarchy protest I would need to get involved in or something, but often their presence is erased from the anti-abortion, you know, like the woman who, you know, like I think wrote and really like spearheaded the heartbeat bill in a lot of states. That's a woman, you know, like, so there are a lot of really prominent women in the anti-abortion movement who, and it also has to do with like how women relate to each other, you know, and that's like a very, that's a different thing, and it doesn't like play out in public in the same, you know, so I was trying to like get into that a little bit, like how do women, like I wanted to get into how those two women would relate to each other, which isn't the same as like the Repent Whore, you know, like the Repent Whores group, or it's not as easy. Like I feel like there's a lot of ways that like women in a workplace relate to each other, that they know what's going on, but isn't that easily languageable. So that's why I was trying to get into that a little bit. And I do think, I don't actually know, I think a lot of opposition to abortion, you know, is very sincere. And I don't have, you know, it's perfectly reasonable to personally oppose abortion, you know, it's more a question of like, do you oppose it for everyone, right? Do you oppose it for other people who are not you? You know, I don't know how sincere Janina, you know what I mean? Like, because she's too good for you to tell. Like, and I think, but that's also a form of self-protection that people can, you know, like their beliefs, if her beliefs are on the table, then she's vulnerable. Instead, she's poised and professional, you know, she's professional. So that's what I was trying to get into with her. Yeah.
I like how you say the relationships between the different women in the office place, or between Janine and Angela. The language, it isn't easily languageable, I think you
Yeah.
said. And what Angela's voice and what you do particularly well is language these latent, or these submerged, or these kind of unsaid relationships. And we learn a lot about kind of interoffice politics,
Yeah.
and about these different people on throughout the hunger strike, and we get a clarity from Angela that you don't normally get, and it's very direct. The voice is very direct. So again, I encourage you to pick up a copy. I think we have time for one more question. Sure.
Sorry, I'm super late, and also I
Hey.
have a book, so like please just disregard the question if it has already been answered in any way. I'm very intrigued by the idea of time in this book, and there are several layers to it. I think it's very important. First, it's about abortion. So time and body are already very politically contested in the issue of abortion. And then the protagonists now, so the story are also organized in a way that is very time sensitive. And the readers are already in anticipation of the anemia procession of the time, and then the anticipated decaying of the body, and also the anticipation of like maybe the urgency and the political situation will like the effect of the hunger strike will change. And then second, because the protagonist is also a worker in the abortion clinic, so like I was just flipping through, and very early on page 11, when she was talking about the arrest of Dr. M, she already said the minute Dr. M was arrested, funnily, about 9 months ago. So this, like the overlap of the time cycle of pregnancy and then abortion as sort of like a result, with the real life event in the book, of the chaos of like how the political event leading to this, and the protagonist herself, what like she being in another time cycle of a hunger strike, that in a lot of ways the temporality of it is against the temporality of an abortion, but also overlapping away, because abortion was seen by the people who are against it as destruction, as it's like against time, it's anti-time. But then you, as the author writing this book, is a novel, it takes time, you are developing your own temporality with it, and you are also, while writing it, I imagine, would also have to react to the changing urgency, the situations, the events of the real lifetime. And there are real hunger strikes going on, responding to different political events. And just like one, sorry if it's like too complicated.
No, it's beautiful. Thank you.
Just
Yeah.
wondering, so like how does this book, writing it, thinking, speculating, all those relationships of time might have shaped how this book has come into being?
That's such a beautiful question. I just like, yeah. Thank you. I think like I kind of just want to like underline everything you said and say like the temporality of abortion, that sort of decision making, that sort of reasoning through like your own life and what you want and what, like it happens on such a tight schedule, right? Like, so that's part of it, of that kind of question of like our decision making isn't, it's some kind of, I'm not going to be able to put it as well as you just, it's like some kind of like theory practice question where you're like, it's not what you like think you would do or what you kind of like an idea that you have. It's like in the moment you have to decide, right? Like, and you have to decide based on what's happening just then in your life, that in that particular moment of your life. So I feel like that's part of it. And that's like in writing a novel, like I feel like writing a novel is, so artificial because it takes so long and you're like, it takes years and you're like not clear why you're doing it. But also, as you noted, like during the time of writing the novel, all the laws around abortion, started in 2020. And between 2020 and 2025, the legal landscape for abortion changed, entirely. And like also it kept changing back. It was like it is and remains like very chaotic. Like it's not people have different rights from like one month to another, you know, like from one place to another place. So that, you know, I don't know that there's like any way to like represent that except maybe through a sense of like feeling or urgency or you know, a little bit of chaos. So that is one set of questions. But I think like, and as you say, like people are on hunger strike all the time, you know, like, and are in situations not unlike this one where their hunger strike isn't eliciting a response in relation, you know, particularly Palestinian prisoners are on hunger strike quite frequently. You know, we see it also in the U.S. prisons. So, you know, there's like waves of hunger strikes that are always happening that sort of like blip up in the news and then like maybe dissolve out again of whoever's consciousness. So yeah, I think in terms of like that time writing the novel, like I think it's a little bit like you sort of start something and then figure out how to keep, you know, does it keep responding to things around it. You can't like build everything in, you know, like as it's happening, and that I don't think that would work or be right. So it has to be something that's more emotional. And for me, I think as a writer, I try to keep some, and this has something to do with that idea of abortion as decision making, but like some little bits that are a notebook of my everyday life. So there's details that are just coming from my life that I just put in there because that feels like it keeps it honest or it like anchors it to something that's happening, at least just for one person in time. So I don't know if that gets at everything, but it's like a beginning of an answer. Yeah.
There was one part in the book about the heartbeat law, the idea of the heartbeat law that has to do with kind of time and figuring out if and when you needed to. Did you want to speak about that a little? Because I thought that was, I thought of that when the question was asked, because it has a very particular time element. And then the fact of the days of the hunger strike as they lengthen, as we watch Angela get kind of less coherent or a little bit less strong.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but
I think it's like not real. Like I don't think well, I guess hunger strikes vary a little bit. I did read that like Bobby Sands stopped his journal on day 17 because he couldn't write anymore, and some people seem to have different experiences. So I was like, I think it's obviously a bit artificial. But I think the heartbeat law too. It's like, I mean, probably everyone in this room knows this, but there's just something very like irritating about the fact that they always say 6 weeks, because you're like, it's not 6 weeks, you know, like it's starting back before you were pregnant. So you're like, it's such a absolutely minuscule amount of time in which you're supposed to somehow interact with these like impenetrable systems of healthcare and have like, so that sense of it's not, there's an idea of a reasonableness that's actually like completely cruel in how it manifests, like, and so that maybe there's something in there about how like we're talked to as though like our we were late or lazy or disorderly or something, but in reality there was no time. Like, yeah, I don't know.
It's the law is deceptive about time. And how it plays. The book is incredible. The book has a very clear voice and very funny. We're going to talk about humor, but I think we've run out of time.
Yeah.
But to read some great quips and jokes, please pick up Statement. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming. We do have copies of Hilary's book, but also Eugene's book up there, so feel free to buy extra copies. They make great gifts. Hilary's going to be signing right here where my coworker is. You can just grab your stuff and line up on this side of the room because we do pack up immediately to make the store into a store again. Thanks for coming. Yeah, of course.